Do not fast forward this. Membership ends today. The doors are closing today at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you have not signed up for the membership that you want, now is the time to make a decision. Head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership to select which membership level is for you. If you are ready to grow, if you are ready to level up, now is the time. Doors are not opening up again until March 2024, and you do not want to miss this. We have support whether you're in solo practice, starting a group practice, you have a group practice, or you want to go big and launch an audience. Now is the time. Head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership. I'll see you in there. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 911. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so glad that you are here with me today. We cover so many topics around business, marketing, networking, clinical skills, all sorts of amazing things. And, we at the end of September just had Level Up Week, over 20 webinars in 1 week. I mean, it was crazy. And this week, our memberships are still open. You're going to want to make sure that you can grab one of those memberships as soon as possible because I think it's closing today. So make sure you grab that. That's Next Level Practice, Group Practice Launch, Group Practice Boss, and Audience Building Academy. They're open right now and they're closing at the end of business today. So make sure you grab that spot over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. All right. Today we're talking about some money stuff. And I remember when I was a kid, my parents were really good about teaching me money things really early on. That's one of the really strong things that they taught me, and a sense of responsibility, a sense of earning money. And I remember in second grade, I wanted a skateboard so bad. I saw Tony Hawk and all these other skateboarders and had this vision of being a skateboarder. And my parents said that they would pay for half of it if I could save up for it. And I wanted this $30 skateboard and I saved $15. And I remember the neighbors were going out of town and they said they wanted the water in their bird bath changed every day, which now as an adult, I'm like, they seriously just wanted to give me money and have me do a sense of responsibility as like a 7-year-old. My parents probably gave them the $10 or $15, but every day I would go next door and I would dump out the old water, refill it. And then finally I bought this skateboard at Kmart. And the downside of it was very quickly I realized that a Nash skateboard was the worst skateboard in the world. And so then it was I got to save up for a better skateboard. But very early on, my parents were save, 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 save. But one thing I didn't really know is how to invest, how to start a business, grow a business, all those things, profit and loss. Those were things I never learned in grad school. I never took a business class. Those really basics of investing and doing well. Basically, saving was my only strategy, which I could do pretty well. I'm like a little squirrel, just kind of stocking away money. But there's a lot of strategies out there around tax optimization, about investing, about how we run our businesses, that it's really important to bring in an expert. And that's where Ryan Derousseau is such an expert in this area. Ryan is a fee-only financial planner, which I love, and we'll talk about why, who specializes in working with therapists to manage their personal finances so they can focus on clients. In his past life, he was a self-employed writer working for outlets including, check this out, Fortune, Money, Forbes, the New York Times, CNBC, and many more discussing personal finance, investing, and retirement issues. He now shares tricks and trades he learned working for himself with clients at United Financial Planning Group based in Long Island. Ryan, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so excited you're here today.
Thank you, Joe. I'm very excited to be here as well. I love that anecdote at the beginning. I have a 7-year-old myself, and I think I need to incorporate that actually to teach him a little bit about money as well. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny because I have an 8-year-old and 12-year-old and both girls. And it was probably 2 years ago that I started giving them an allowance, but it's based on what they do around the house.
Mhm.
A lot of families will have like a checklist, like you do these 5 things and then you get your allowance. And to me, part of being just like a good roommate is that you're contributing and that you don't have like, okay, I did the dishes. Now I can just sit back and like trash the house. And
Mhm.
so to me, it's, you get $5 if you did an okay job of just, contributing, helping out, $10 a week if you really like have knocked it out of the park. And when you take out the stinky compost and you don't complain about it, like that's the stuff I'm looking for. And it's been amazing. Like I feel like I genuinely have like really good roommates that I can say to them, I need you guys to unload the dishwasher while I'm doing a podcast. And there's no complaining. They just do it.
That's
And
great.
my 8-year-old, she spends like a freak. I mean, she will just like save up her money and then drop like $60 to $80 on toys.
That sounds like mine.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? You earned it. You can buy as many of those stuffies as you want. And I think it's ridiculous. But, we'll go to like these kind of cheaper stores and they'll think about their purchases. And my 12-year-old, saves it all. So it's interesting because I don't have to then say, no, you can't buy this. And yes, you can. So,
Yeah. No, I love it. Also, I would say don't start too high with the allowance because they expect
yeah.
raises at some point, and oh my gosh, that end of the week comes by every week. So
Oh man, yeah, they're not quite there yet. But I have some extra chores that they can do to make more money if they want. But to me, that's just like the basics. I don't account for inflation, so every year I'm saving money.
it's great.
Cool. Well, let's start with like why'd you go into a career around money and specifically money and therapists?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, first of all, I've just always been a writer of money. Like it's what I did out of college, and so it's something that I was always kind of drawn to, even if I wasn't really aware that I was drawn to it. It was clearly something that I was interested in, whatnot. Partly because like there's such a lack of education in money growing up, and my parents did okay, but they didn't talk to me about money. I had no idea like what they were saving, what they were, how much they were making or anything like that. And I think I have like a natural pull to just like kind of find things out. That's probably why I went into journalism at the beginning. It's just because I wanted to learn these things, right? Um, but what happens is when you're writing for a broad audience, you tend to write about a lot of the same stuff, and so that's what I was doing. And I had a real pull towards like helping people one on one, which you don't get a lot of ability to do as a writer because you're just kind of interviewing people, but not that you don't see the results of it, right? So they're just you interview them and then they're gone. But I really wanted that one-on-one development. Plus, I had always kind of worked for myself, so I had learned a ton of things about like working for yourself, saving on taxes, the investment strategies, things of that nature that really propelled me from like struggling as a writer. And we're talking about writing, which is really talk about poor pay. That's writing to really thriving in it. And so I really realized wanted to make that switch. Meanwhile, as I'm making that switch, I'm realizing that there's a group of people I kind of enjoy. I just enjoy naturally had a draw to, enjoyed talking to, saw a need for, which was private practice therapists. They dealt with a lot of the same things that I was dealing with from a cash flow perspective, from a tax perspective, that sort of thing. That it just made for a natural sort of connection there. So there was a need, but then also, like my own life has been shaped by therapy. I've been seeing the same therapist for almost 10 years now, probably. And I use him sort of as a business coach, sort of as a since I work for myself, someone to throw ideas off of, that sort of thing. It's not always really digging deep into like my history or anything like that, but that experience has really, made me and my wife's in therapy as well. I know how valuable it is for her. So our family, we've really been served well by therapists, and so it's both a personal and sort of like where my skills fit is kind of how I found myself. Really focusing in on the therapy space.
Yeah, and by working with so many therapists, I'm sure that you, similar to me, start to notice some macro trends across the field. When you think about the things that most therapists get wrong in their mindset, in how they're approaching money, the way they're thinking about investing, the way they're thinking about their personal finances. What are a handful of those things that are the most common things people get wrong when it comes to money?
Sure. I would say there's two that I most commonly see. And the first one is from a mindset perspective. It goes one of the two ways. Either they, from a mindset, they're kind of fearful of money. They're not used to managing their own money. Maybe they think money is like a four-letter word in a lot of ways. And so you see that often. The other side of that coin is they're not too focused on money, but they just want to make as much as possible type of thing. So it's almost the exact opposite sort of mindset. Both can be detrimental because, the one, if you're afraid of money, you may be not raising fees like you need to, or setting your rates where they need to. Whereas if you're just kind of trying to make as much as possible, you're just kind of running on a treadmill with no end, and we don't want that either. We want to make sure we're matching whatever we're doing from a professional standpoint to what those goals are in life, because like money is just a means to afford what we want to achieve in life, and that's really an important approach to it, because otherwise you get stuck in this, you know, either I don't make enough, and so I have a mindset of I'm failing in some way, or I have to make more and more and more and more to no end. So that's a big one from a mindset perspective. From a X's and O's perspective, just not putting their business structure or business goals or business finances into their greater financial picture. Like we have, our business, right? We all have a business if we're listening to this podcast in some way or want to become a business owner in some way. And so we do so much for that business, but so much impacts that business and how we view that business and the success of that business. And a lot of that impact is from the other end of the spectrum, our personal finances. And so, what's happening from a personal standpoint that is either making us take on more risk, or not taking enough risk in the business, or opening up avenues that could improve the business. And so, not putting that in that full picture can harm you in both ways. If that
Well,
makes
let's
sense.
get into some of the nitty gritty of finances and kind of that personal picture. So why don't we start with, like, would it be better for us to start with talking about people's personal finances or with their business finances?
Well, we can talk about. Well, let's talk about first the both. In terms of the goals, right? So I had mentioned that like sometimes people come in with a mindset without goals in place, and whenever we're talking about finances, we need goals because we need something to reach. Um, I I will say that when I am working with older clients in particular, they think that they're never going to retire, right? They think they're going to work until they're 90 years old seeing clients, and that's fine. That is totally fine. But what I often tell them is, while it's important for you to want to work until then and create that opportunity, you don't want to be in a position where you have to work till then. Those are two very different scenarios. And so often what we see is a therapist will come to us and say, I'm just going to work until I'm 90, and so I'm not worried about retirement. And while that's fine, we still want to use the tools of retirement to make sure that you're creating financial independence for yourself. So let's say when you're 75, you fall down, you break a hip, and now you're out for 6 months, that you're okay. Like that's not going to change your lifestyle in any way, and you're going to be protected. Um, I hate telling this story because it's a very tragic story. But right as COVID was becoming known, so this was like March 2020. My wife was seeing her therapist she had seen for a number of years, was very comfortable with this person, and the therapist tells her that she has pancreatic cancer and she only has about 6 months to live. Um, a tragic situation. Obviously, the family you're worried about, her you're worried about. But meanwhile, she has to work. She works all the way up until the end of her life because, like, they need money. And what ends up happening after she passes away is the family has to sell the home. They have to move elsewhere, and then we lost touch with them. Um, but that was terrible for the therapist. But that was also terrible for my wife, who you know, cared for this person. And it took her years to find a new therapist in the meantime. And so, like, that person probably took the notion of, I'm going to work forever, to an extreme. And we want to avoid that. We want to give you that option, but we don't want to necessarily, um, you know, make it one where you have to do it. That's a big one. I mean, that one I would say is, uh, particularly amongst older therapists, the one I see the most. Younger
Mm.
therapists, I would say the one I see the most is they're using their business as like a free expense account, just because they can write it off on taxes. And that gets them into trouble like debt. They don't know where the cash is going, that sort of thing. And I see that in therapist private practices, but I see that in any self employment situation. That is a very common idea or notion.
Mm. Well, let's walk through how to do that. So, what are some techniques that people can employ to get a better handle on their finances, get a better handle on their investing? What are some things that you would say are just baseline? Like, this is what you should probably be doing in your private practice and in your personal life.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you or before we started recording that I'd listened to your 10 money tips, and there was some really good ones in there. One, yeah, I think you mentioned the idea of a bookkeeper, so obviously you need a bookkeeper. I don't think that's new to a lot of your listeners. The other one I loved was having an emergency fund for both your business and your personal. That is something I often encourage people to do, because you don't want a concern on one end to impact the other. So if you need a new roof, suddenly the business is tapping its resources to get to that new roof, and now we can't invest in the business. We don't want that. And how you get that emergency fund is understanding how much you need to pay yourself each month. We often look at self-employment as if, like, whatever I bring in, I'm just giving myself, and it's like essentially a one-to-one sort of situation. But instead, what we need to do is take a step back and look at, from a personal standpoint, how much are you spending a month, and how much do you need to spend a month on your personal side, for rent or mortgage, for food, for things of that nature, and understand what that mark is. That's your salary. That's when you're starting out, that's your salary. We just need to cover your expenses, and everything else can go into the business. And so as we're making money, and as money's coming in, we're not tapping everything that you're making. Instead, you're sending that salary over to your personal side, using that for those expenses, and you're building that business emergency fund. Too often, I see that business emergency fund as non-existent because of that. So that's an important one that comes up quite often.
Going in network with insurance can be tough. I know when I took insurance, there were long wait times and it was so confusing. Filing all the right paperwork is time consuming and tedious, and even after you're done, it can take months to get credentialed and start seeing clients. That's why Alma makes it easy and financially rewarding to accept insurance. When you join their insurance program, you can get credentialed within 45 days and access enhanced reimbursement rates with major payers. They also handle all of the paperwork from eligibility checks to claims submissions and guarantee payment within 2 weeks of each appointment. Once you've joined Alma's insurance program, you can see clients in your state of licensure, regardless of where you're working from. It's amazing to know that you can be fully online. Learn more about building a thriving practice with Alma at helloalma.com/Joe. That's hello, ALMA.com/Joe to get started. Now, I know before we started recording on those 10 money things, you said you might have some adjustments. Was there more to it that you would adjust or think through differently than how I framed it? You're the expert. Feel free to share or tweak things that I said in that episode.
In terms of spending, or do you want to talk about other sort of comments?
Yeah, I mean, I say we dive into some of the investing, tax strategy,
Sure.
that sort of stuff too. All of that's in your expertise, and obviously, if there's things outside of that, then I know you'll say, nope, that's not something I cover.
Yeah. So on an investing side, I'm a like I don't. I believe you said you know what a fee only advisor is, and what I would say is from an investment side, when you come across a fee only advisor, what often is going to be the case is they're going to suggest one thing when it comes to investing, and that's uh, low fee uh, or no cost broad based index funds. Um, Often when we get when we get investment statements from those who invest for themselves for many years, what we see is they've tried to do it themselves. This creates the idea of stock picking because that's what like the media talks about. See, if you're watching CNBC, that's what friends may be talking about. Oh, I sold Peloton for X amount of money, and now I'm going to buy a car. But what you're not hearing is all the failures within that mix. And so what builds up over time is just a portfolio of different stocks for no rhyme or reason, and it creates basically a secondary job of just like managing your stocks. The problem with that is not only is it time consuming, what happens is stock picking is about the worst way to go about your long term investing strategy. Studies have been shown that professional stock pickers, so these are people who are paid to actually pick stocks for a living, over after I think after about 10 years, 90% of those people who are paid to do this um, underperform just a basic index fund. Not only that, but if you add in fees, it's even less. And then on top of that, you would have to know which stock picker is actually successful before you begin picking stocks. So you can see how the deck is totally stacked against you in terms of picking stocks. And so, from an investment standpoint, really focus on those just having broad-based market index funds. When you're looking for advice, you had mentioned a financial advisor watching out for the 1% fees. That's particularly for investment advisors. So
Hmm.
if you go to a Fidelity or if you go to whatever your brokerage is, they'll manage your investments for you, and they're going to charge you about 1%. And they may even kind of spice things up and say, look at all we're doing. We're not just investing in index funds, but as I've already explained, like that's not a good way to go because you don't know if they're any good at what they do. But also what they often do is kind of mimic index funds. So they'll say, look, I've got you in all these different stocks, and this is going to give you broad coverage to all these different areas of the world, when in fact you could just have done that for a lot cheaper in an index fund. And then that as that 1%, as you had explained in your podcast previously, really cuts into your returns over the course of many years. And so you want to avoid that. So if you're looking for help, you want to make sure you're finding like a financial planner, a financial advisor who is looking at your entire financial picture, not just your investing, because that's just a small portion of what your finances will look in the future. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so that's the investing standpoint. Maybe if you have a question there, I'll answer that, and then we can get into taxes and other stuff as well.
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, that's all the stuff that I've learned and heard. And, what I love about that approach is it's so simple. It's like
Yeah.
a broad index fund. You're basically putting your money across the market instead of, guessing at these mutual funds that were probably handpicked, and had, tons of the losers. And
Hmm.
it's just like invest across the market. You get the, percent the market has averaged. And if it goes up, then your fund goes up. If it goes down, your fund goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk tax strategy. I feel like that's an area that, a lot of people have CPAs that have varying abilities. What are some some tax things that maybe are pretty common, and what are some tax things that maybe people overlook?
Um, so one thing I'll say about the tax thing, uh, it's common in the sense that people know about it. It's it's uncommon that they don't necessarily know the full impact of it. So what I'm talking about is the S corp tax structure. I don't know. Do you know much about the S corp tax structure?
I do, but a lot of people maybe don't. So
Okay.
feel free to dig into it.
Yeah, so what the S corp does. So when you work for yourself, you have what's called self-employment tax. This is while it has this term, it's not actually self-employment tax. What it is Social Security and Medicare tax. And when you work for an employer, what you do is when you get your paycheck, you pay a, it's like 7.65% in Medicare and Social Security to Medicare and Social Security, and then your employer pays the other half of that. So it's about 7.65%, I think, off the top of my head. Uh, the self-employment tax, when you work for yourself, is you're both the employee and the employer, so you have to pay 15.3%, I think is what it is. You have to pay all of it. And so that's considered the self employment tax. And so what the S Corp structure does is it defines you as both employer and employee. So now you get to give yourself a salary, just like you're an employee. And on that salary, you have to pay self employment tax. So let's say you make $100,000, right, in revenues, and you pay yourself a salary of $80,000. So on that $80,000, you have to pay self employment tax, the full 15.3%. On the $20,000, well, that is what allows you as the employer to take as an investment in the company. So what the S corp does is say it lots what your salary is and what the profits or returns above and beyond the salary is. And so of that 20%, you get to save on the self-employment tax, but you also get to save on regular income tax because that's taxed at much lower rates. And so it's very valuable. Like when we're talking, when you see incomes that get to 200, 300, $400,000, there's significant savings because the one rule that the S corps give is that it has to be reasonable to your profession. What's reasonable is going to differ depending on the profession, depending on the state you live in, depending on what average returns are, that sort of thing. And that's where working with a CPA is really important. What the CPA doesn't evaluate, unless you are doing ongoing long-term tax planning with them, which is a considerable extra fee and they may or may not provide, is what's the impact if you're doing that and you're making $100,000, what's the impact long term? Because, like I said, that money is going to Social Security and Medicare, right? And so, if you're not funding Social Security and Medicare, then you could be short thrifted come the time you need those services, right? And so, let's say you're someone making 60,000, right? And now you're saying your reasonable income is 50,000 and the 10,000 is a distribution or profit. Well, it may have been better to use that 10,000 and pay that towards Social Security so you have that in the future as opposed to getting the slight savings in taxes today. So that is one where I see people immediately assume S corp is absolutely the right way to go. But it really depends on the situation. It depends on how your business is thriving or not, and it may adjust year to year. It's also why I often encourage people to look towards the LLC or PLLC, depending on which state you're in, and then opting into the S corp at the beginning of the year if you think you're going to have a good year, because it gives you the option to do that, or it gives you the option to treat yourself as an LLC where everything is being um, uh, it just trickles down to you as a regular tax.
So what I'm hearing is if you're concerned about how much you want to put into Social Security or Medicare, that and if you want to put more into that, then typically that may be the LLC or PLLC, and then the S corp is most valuable when you're looking at those tax savings, currently rather than, in the future. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate because especially when you're talking about incomes that get a little higher, which is really good for the S corp. Because remember, with the S corp, you're also having higher IRS or higher CPA fees because they're going to charge you a lot more for that tax or for that tax service. Along with like if your state has high filing fees, which some states do, you need to be able to cover that and get the tax savings that's worthwhile. Plus, have enough that you're covering your future through Social Security and whatnot. So it's typically once you've reached a certain mark, and I can't give you that mark, that's what the obvious next question, but it's just really hard to give you that mark without knowing more of the personal situation.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. What are other areas regarding taxes and your private practice that people overlook or need to be aware of?
So the other thing on taxes I would say is, and this goes to what I was talking about at the beginning, is looking at your full financial picture, is also understanding what your partner's doing if you have a partner and you're filing with them, because that's going to dramatically change the full scope of uh, your tax picture. If they are, let's say they're older and they work for an organization and they have a bunch of stock options coming down. Well, that's going to dramatically impact what you should be doing from a business standpoint because you need to look at that entire financial picture and make sure you're saving uh, you're reducing your tax exposure as much as possible today. And there's going to be different forms to reduce that exposure. Maybe you're increasing the amount you're saving for retirement that year, or you're filing as an S corp that year. But understanding what the partner is doing in those situations is really important because that's going to give us sort of a framework for how we're going to approach that year from a tax planning perspective. And the good thing about like long-term financial planning is we're putting this into uh, to today's figures. So we're like trying to figure out today. We know those options are going to come in the future. So we're going to figure out the best way to reduce the tax exposure then. But at the same time, we're also going to figure out what's the best way to position your business for then as well. So it's both. That's a
Now,
big one.
yeah,
The other
yeah,
one I
go
would
ahead.
say is retirement planning. Often, I often tell people that for your business, if you want to create um, a uh, a beautiful side business, invest in retirement because not only is that going to create a very big portfolio for you down the line that makes you feel more financially secure, more safe, more willing to take risk in the business. It also creates tax savings today when you're using the right tax structures to do so.
Yeah, is there a rule of thumb as to like how much of your income, like in regards to should you have 5 times what your annual income is or your annual spending, like how much should you have saved going into retirement typically?
Yeah, I don't like to put it in that. I know. So from my
Okay.
media world, that's all we did was try to put it. And I remember writing a very specific story where it was like based on fidelity research, and it was like this time at this point you're supposed to have this amount compared to what you make today. And I always remembered at 40 you're supposed to have 2 times the amount of your salary saved today. For some reason, that's the one that really stood out to me. But instead, what I would say is um, when you're looking at numbers like that, uh, you want to save what you can today, um, and that's really going to be a balance. Um, I know in the therapy space, there's approach to um, like profits is profit first. It's like a
Hmm.
almost like a behavioral finance top tool where when you're looking at your business, you're taking profits out first and then figuring out the expenses from there. It can be a very valuable way, but I would also say that it's also important to take retirement first. When you're looking at your business finances, it's okay to say part of my salary this month is that $1,000 towards retirement. because it is essentially salary. That's your future salary because that's what you're going to live off of when you're not working anymore.
Well, before I ask my final question, is there anything around money and therapists that we haven't covered that you think we need to dig into in the last few minutes?
Yeah, there's a one. I would say particularly when I'm looking at older clients, but I think it's important for any therapist, no matter at what stage they are, is understand succession planning. That's been kind of the surprise for me as I've walked into the space is how few therapists look at their business as surviving beyond them. Um, you don't have to be in a massive group practice to eventually sell your practice. It's common in all sorts of fields. You know, my field, financial advising. It's common in accounting. It's common in law, and in therapy practices. We don't think of it that way. Partly because it's you and your client, right? Like without you, they're not going to trust whoever comes next. And so what value is there? But if you're preparing in advance, you can create ways to allow for those passing of clients to the next generation. And right now, you have so many new therapists coming into the world, into the field, and you also have so many therapists leaving the field because of just generational um, age numbers, that it would be a disservice to your life's work not to consider that. Whether it's finding a partner that you know you could trust down the line to practice the way you practice and help clients the way you like to help clients. Or whether it is in the last number of years before you want to retire or step away, building a group practice so there's something to sell in the future. Really thinking about that, it can be. I cannot tell you the value that like saying selling a small practice for $200,000 can bring to someone's financial picture when they are just uh, barely able to survive life after work. Then with the $200,000 thriving after work, because there's between investing that money, between how that money comes to you through the way the business cell is structured, it can have a dramatic impact. And
Hmm.
so ignoring that is something I just wouldn't do. And thinking about that today is it can help you because it's not a short term fix. It takes time to prepare a business to first a session.
So awesome. Well, Ryan, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I think what I would want them to know is that when often when people come to someone like me, like a financial planner or financial advisor, it's because of something terrible that's happening. Whether they're massively in debt, they might lose their house, their business is really struggling, and they can't figure out ways out of it. Um, that's that's when they come to us, but it doesn't have to be. And it's actually far more like there's so much more we can do when they come to us in a position where it's not a five alarm fire than when we have time to think about our options, think about solutions, different solutions. And so, you know, when you're looking at your finances and you're feeling good about things, that's the time to, either talk to others within your practice or within your industry, like and listening to podcasts like this, of course, and figuring out sort of the next steps. But it can be also talking to someone, like myself, and making sure that you're in a position that you want to be in the next 10 years.
So awesome. Well, I know you put together a checklist. Tell us about that checklist and if people want to connect with you, where they can find you.
Yeah, so I did. I put a checklist together, six things that if you do as a private practice owner, practitioner, if you do these six things, you're going to be ahead of the game in so many ways. And so you can find that checklist. While I work with United Financial Planning Group, I also have my own site called thinkingcapfinancial.com, and you can find the checklist on that site at thinkingcapfinancial.com/checklist.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure we have links to that in the show notes as well. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
These kind of money issues are so important to think about and to plan for. And there's no time like right now to get started on it, and to really surround yourself with people that are helping you figure out, all those little kind of things to do within a private practice. We have experts like this in Next Level Practice, in Group Practice Boss, every single month. We are bringing in people to ask questions, to dive in, to dig in, like every month, around clinical issues, marketing issues, money, how to optimize your business. And we do that every single month. And if you are not a part of our membership communities, you are totally missing out. And those memberships, again, close today. They won't open back up until March. So please make sure you head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership, and then you can figure out which of the memberships is right for you. Next Level Practice is our membership aimed at solo practitioners. Group Practice Launch is our membership specifically aimed at people going from solo to their first hire. Group Practice Boss is our membership specifically for people that own a group practice. And Audience Building Academy is specifically for people that are building passive income, building an audience, launching things well outside of their practice into the world. So you can read all about all the details of every single one of those memberships over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. Again, Thursday today, that all closes. So make sure you go grab that. Also, we could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. Alma is our sponsor today, and they know that going in network with insurance can be tough. Oftentimes, people just don't do it. They just do private pay. There's so much paperwork. It's a confusing process. Filling out all the right paperwork can be time consuming and tedious. And that's why Alma makes it easy and financially rewarding to accept insurance. When you join their insurance program, you can get credentialed within 45 days. Once you've joined Alma's insurance program, you can see clients in your state of licensure, regardless of where you're working from. Learn more about a thriving private practice with Alma at helloalma.com/Joe. That's helloalma.com/Joe to get started. Every single phase of private practice has its own unique challenges and its own unique opportunities. Whether you're starting and growing a solo practice, getting a group practice going, whether you're already a group practice boss, or you want to go big and go national with the skills you have, every phase has its challenges. And doing that in community with people and learning from other folks and having that guidance is so, so important. That's why we have a membership community for every phase of practice. Next Level Practice is for solo practitioners to help you get organized, fill up your practice, and get that solo practice rocking. We have small groups, we have accountability partners, we have live events every single week. And also, if in the first 3 months, in the first 90 days, you're not satisfied, we have a 90-day money-back guarantee. Next, we have Group Practice Launch. Group Practice Launch is a 6-month program specifically for you to launch a group practice. We have weekly meetings with that as well as guided courses, and you get full access to Next Level Practice. And you're guaranteed to hire someone in the first 6 months, or you get to go through it again for free. Next, we have Group Practice Boss. Group Practice Boss is for people that have group practices and want to continue to grow. All those ups and downs of having a group practice, of changing that mindset, being in community with other people, and getting that support from us. We, with that as well, have weekly meetings, and you get to come to Next Level Practice events as well. So that's 8 meetings a month that you could come to live to get extra help. Also, there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. Lastly, we have Audience Building Academy. Audience Building Academy is specifically for people that are ready to level up and go national. Maybe you want to get a traditionally published book, have a podcast, launch some e-products and e-courses and scalable income. Audience Building Academy is specifically for you so that you can level up and go national. We'll walk you through exactly how you go from having a solo or a group practice to going national. We'll help you build your email list, get on podcasts, and really level up. So no matter what your phase is, we have a membership community for you. Over at practiceofthepractice.com/memberships, you can read all about them and sign up. This week and next week are the only weeks that they all are open until 2024, so you're not going to want to miss this. Go in there and decide which membership phase is for you and join today. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.